Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's our pleasure to welcome back to the program JP Wiggins, who's co-founder and vice president of logistics at 3GTMS. And today we're going to talk about why LSPs, logistics service providers, need a digital transformation strategy. Now, analysts and others have been talking about the importance of digital transformation for years, but the message didn't quite hit home until, let's say, 2020, when some of these companies began to struggle as a result of the pandemic. And now digital transformation is a priority, especially for logistics service providers. So why is having a digital transformation strategy important? Where do you begin, and where does the TMS fit within this strategy? Well, those are some of the key questions we're going to address in today's episode. And it's great to have JP to share his insights and advice on this topic. So JP, welcome back to the
Oh,
program.
great. Thanks to be back. Glad to be here.
Great. Well, in our previous episode, we talked about another hot topic that certainly, as a result of the pandemic, was the significant rise in e-commerce and the impact that that's had on parcel. I think kind of the bigger story behind that is just the bigger need for digital transformation
Right. Yeah.
within the logistics industry. So I'm going to go ahead and echo Simon Sinek, and let's start with the why, right? Why is it important for logistics service providers to have a digital transformation strategy? Why today? Why now?
It's a great topic and it's very timely, like we were just talking about on COVID. But why now? Everyone realized with COVID the such importance of transportation. Even CEOs and CFOs that knew what it was but didn't really know what it was until it really realized their own failings within the company. And throw in there the fact that it is the year 2021 and we have technology available to us, and so many companies just have maybe been laggards. They haven't refused to implement technologies, or they've struggled. We're in a real mode right now where there's so many different pieces of the puzzle. It's hard to really chart a path. What should I be doing? And then you see some of these big companies out there that have billions of dollars to put at technology, charting their own path. You kind of get into, well, what should I do now? And that's the topic of conversation I get into in the CXOs levels of the various third-party logistics companies, brokers, freight forwarders that I deal with on a personal basis. This is what the people I'm talking to are talking about right now.
Yeah, in many ways, they're kind of caught in the middle, right? In the one hand, the customer requirements, they haven't abated at all. If anything, they become more stringent. And when you have all these things like e-commerce and last mile delivery and all these things that are impacting the industry, so their job has become harder, more riskier, if you will. And again, if they have outdated technology, it's very difficult for them to keep up with customer expectations. And then on the other hand, like you mentioned, you've got some big players out there. There's a lot of money that's flowing into the system, and a lot of money that some of the big players are investing in technology. And for everybody else in the middle, it's kind of like, well, unless we have to do something in order to, number one, continue to satisfy our customers and meet those customer requirements, but number two, remain relevant and competitive, to some of the big guys. And I think that's kind of echoing what you just said there, and I think that's what I hear as well.
Yeah, what I tell folks is you have to chart your own path. For one, let's use the analogy of when Amazon first came out. There's Amazon. And then everyone thought they had to compete against Amazon to survive. No, and that turned out to be just folly to try to compete against Amazon. Competing against Amazon is reserved for the very few. But yet, there were so many thousands of companies out there that found out how to work with Amazon and how to chart their own path and create their own opportunity related to Amazon. And I think we're running into the same exact world right now with the CH Robinsons, the Convoys, the Uber Freights, and even Amazon brokerage, these huge, big digital freight marketplaces. You don't have to be them. You don't have to compete against them. You don't, you're not going to have the billions of dollars of R&T budget that they have. So, what you need to do is to chart your own path, figure out your own methodology, figure out what your own business is, and then create your own path. So that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I think it relates to kind of what I was going to ask next, which was there's so much when people hear digital transformation, there's just so much buzz and hype around that term, right? And it can seem like a daunting journey for many companies, right? Because it's like, okay, well, I hear all this buzz about machine learning and then AI. I hear a lot of buzz about the digital freight. I hear a lot of buzz about you know, all sorts of, technology. So the challenge becomes, where do you begin? How do you get started? So it seems like, taking a step back and figuring out your strategy, or figure out what it is you need to accomplish is kind of the first step, right?
Yeah, and, I'm going to use a quote from Jeff Bezos here. He believes that experimentation is what to have real experimentation. It's not just fake experimentation, but to be able to be to put experiments forward and to that's how you're only really going to learn. You have to be prepared to succeed. You have to be prepared to fail when you do experiments, and that brings us back to what we do on on a software vendor. If you're looking for a software vendor right now for a core system like a TMS, obviously I'm a TMS vendor, you can't wait on your vendor anymore. You can't wait on your vendor to set up your business flows. You can't wait on your vendor to design screens for you. You can't wait on your vendor to design your business rules and process automation. You have to be able to do that themselves. So that's yeah, it's a differentiator, and yeah, I got to throw my marketing message out there, but that's really key when you're looking at your core technology that you're dealing with right now is you have to be able to like I said, we're looking at process fulfillment. You're looking at what your own business path is. You have to experiment with different business models. What business model is going to work? What do you think my customers want? How do I go after all of my customers' freight, not just some of my customers' freight? And then you figure out how to do that. But like I said, you don't want to be waiting on a vendor. You don't want to be waiting on a software vendor for you to go do this and to do these experimentations and to set up these sales programs and to implement new programs with new customers. You have to have total flexibility when you do this.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember many years ago, I wrote a blog post. It was kind of a twist on software as a service, and I called it software as a self service.
Yeah, I remember that
And,
actually.
part of it was, the ability to, go online to a website, put in your credit card, download a software solution, configure it on your own, and be off and running. But I think this is a kind of an extension of that. What you just talked about is the fact that, obviously technology companies are going to continue to do their own innovation, and
Mhm.
they've got to invest in R&D, and you've got to look at that as well. But to your point, the speed of business and the speed of change is so much that users also need, the tools and the capabilities to easily and quickly configure and experiment, as you just said, with different workflows, different UIs, different business rules, as their
Yeah.
customers are asking them, hey, can you do this?
Well,
Can we change this business process? Can you enable something new? They can't say, okay, well, let me call my software vendor and see
yeah.
if he or she can, do this in 6 9 months when the customer needs that
And,
today.
and also right now, and I'll throw this out there, log tech, logistics technology. It's one of the hottest sectors in investment right now. There was Freightways reported $55 billion in new investment just last year alone. That's coming into log tech. There's a lot more of these software vendors that are coming up with these beautiful offerings, whether it's capacity management or anything. I mean, there's like 1,000 different things. Visibility is a great big one right now. Let's say you even want to connect to your API to carriers. Carriers APIs are growing by leaps and bounds. 18 months ago, it wasn't there, but right now carriers themselves are offering great APIs where I can get rates from them. I can get my documents, my proof of delivery, but yet, you know, all these different pieces of functionality of a technology out there, you're not going to go out there and try to hook them all up. This is where we say, like, you need your core system. And if you're a 3PL, your core system is your TMS. It is your system of record. So look at that as like your central control point. And that should probably be your most important decision is what's my core TMS? And then knowing that in the next couple of years, you're going to be adding on new pieces of functionality. AI is for pricing. Of course, the classics, the miling systems, the visibility systems, the proof of delivery, OCR scanners, document management systems, even yard management systems. I mean, there's all sorts of different companies together. And the key is you're going to be plugging new pieces and pieces of that puzzle. You're going to be replacing some and inserting others. The tough one though to mess with is going to be your core system of record, your core TMS. So that's where you want to make a best choice of and make sure that you've made a good decision on something that, hey, is it going to allow me to bring in these other pieces of technology? Is it going to support that type of, new digital disruption, as I chart my own path? And will it let me plug in other technologies? And is it easy to bring in new and online things quickly? And so that's why, you got to look at your core systems, and anybody that understands, system structure, that your good environment starts at your core. You got to have the right business objects to work for workflow and intelligence, and to deal with integrations. I mean, integration is probably the key selling point that you have to look at. I mean, regardless of features in TMS, in my world right now, TMS features are commodity functions. There's dozens and dozens of vendors that can like tender a truckload for you or process freight bill payment. I mean, there's a new one every day. But how many of them truly have a business object to plug in 20 different log tech systems? How many are going to integrate certified with your ERPs? How many are going to integrate to, your carrier library? So those are the things you need to look at. Integration is probably key functionality, and just, and that intelligence to work with that integration is important.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like, just to kind of paraphrase a little bit what you just talked about. So when you're thinking about your digital transfer from an LSP standpoint, when you're thinking about your digital transformation uh, strategy, I think you referred to the TMS as kind of being the core, to
Rally
that.
point, the rally
Yeah,
point.
the,
Yeah.
the, the rally point,
Yeah.
for that. So that really becomes kind of maybe that's one way to begin, is really, if you believe that the TMS is truly the core and the rally
Yeah.
point for that, is to really start there with your strategy,
It
understand.
becomes the enabler for log tech is the way I think about it. Yeah.
Right, right. So then how should LSPs approach the TMS evaluation process, right? If they're looking to implement one for the first time, or maybe they're in the process of evaluating whether they need a new one. I mean, what questions should they ask? What kind of capabilities should they look for?
Like I said, integration is going to be key. And integration is a lot more than just mapping data fields and hitting some API nowadays. Because if you think of the way a TMS has to deal with, a TMS has to deal with, I have to deal with my customer's orders. So I have to deal with orders. I have to deal with carriers. Carriers deal with things that loads and shipments and bill of ladings, house bills and master bills. And, warehouses look at the world a little differently. You've got your accounts payables and your accounts receivable that looks at the world differently. So your TMS has to translate from those, and all these systems give you crap at some point. And so you got to have process automation and intelligence to fix bad data. So it's not just integration, it's business intelligence that's used to actually truthfully integrate. And then, I mean, that's really where your total cost of ownership goes skyrocket. If you get a bad system and you're writing all this integration yourself, you're just going to be spending time and time again trying to plug and play with other systems. But we're seeing great technology coming out. I mean, we're seeing some beautiful things coming out in like pricing technologies, the AIs that people are using around pricing. Some great yard management systems that are kicking in, and of course, everyone's talking about visibility and some of those great tools that are out there. You could. But how are you going to plug them in? And not only plug them into your system as a 3PL, but remember, you have to translate all that intelligence to your customer. All right. So that means plugging into your customer, and your customer is going to give you basically zero IT resources to plug into them. Right. So you you have to think through your digital strategy. What is my digital strategy? What are my services I'm offering? How am I going to extend those services to my customer base? So think of that business flow, throw that business flow down, and then slap that at your potential vendors. Here's the business flow I want. Put that to your potential vendors and make them explain it to you, so you truthfully understand what that business flow in is, and then how it helps you or hurts you in your environment, and then make your decisions. That's probably, in my world, what's the most important. Yeah, everyone's got bells and whistles. Everyone's going to put commodity features down, but can they really support the business flow that I'm doing now? And then let's say I want to change that business flow. What's it going to cost me to change that business flow? Can I change that business flow on my own? Can I change process automation? Those are the types of things. Because can I plug in additional third-party log tech? I mean, we're going to see some great things in log tech in the next 2 to 3 years that we can't even envision right now. I can't even think about it. I mean, I've got some ideas on what things are going to go, but it's going to get crazy. I mean, look how e-commerce blew up once Amazon came in. We're in that verge right now. That's going to happen in log tech. We saw it in med tech. We saw it in financial tech, fintech, med tech. Log tech's the next fintech, if you can think about it that way.
Well,
We're going
there's
to
a
see some phenomenal changes in the next 2 to 3 years.
well, that's great. I think what's interesting is, you're right, and I see kind of similar things. I'm going to hold you to your prediction there on log tech. So we'll come back on the program, let's say in 2 years' time, and see where we're at. But I think you're right. I mean, for a long time, and I get asked a lot of questions around, helping with TMS and understanding what different TMS solutions out there and everything else. And you know, historically there's always been this hyper focus on the features and functions, right? What kind of
Yeah.
optimization does it have? Can it do tendering? Freight order and payment, those types of core TMS functionality. And yes, there are differences between different applications and so forth. But that is just one dimension of what you need to look for in a TMS. And I think you brought up another important dimension, and the one that's arguably becoming more important, which is that whole ecosystem side of things,
Yeah.
right? Because the TMS does not exist in a vacuum from the
Right.
standpoint of needing to communicate and collaborate with external trading partners. And I think more importantly, to your point, is that no single TMS does everything or wants to do
Mhm.
everything. So it needs to, plug into all sorts of other different systems, out there and new ones that are coming to market. And I think, you talked about APIs before. It's a very different environment today than it was 20 years ago when we started looking at,
Yeah.
TMSs. And there's a lot of potential today, to really think beyond just the core application. Really, when you're looking at a TMS, think about the whole ecosystem, that you want to tap into, on an ongoing, basis.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean putting a little meat on the bone here on some of the conversations that I have with my 3PL counterparts in the industry is automation is key. You can't afford to have manual transactions anymore, whether that's picking up a phone, calling a carrier, whether it's doing check calls. You got to have normal processing flow and even as many exceptions as you can automatically handled by your tech stack. So that cost of that manual and the speed of the manual also. So you just want things to automatically happen, automatically flow orders through my environment. My customer sends me orders to be routed. They want their 3PL to automatically route them as if you were an on-premise system, as you were on-prem with on-prem resources managing their freight. They want that stuff to happen instantaneously. So that's what we're looking at, and that's what the log tech is really allowing us to do right now, is that we're able to put forth flexible software, flexible business configuration tools, flexible integrations that allow you to go out to your, if a 3PL, go out to your customers, take over not just some of their freight but all of their freight and manage it, and then have it managed automatically. And then you as a 3PL can focus on, well, getting better rates for your customers, doing better service, and figuring out, if you can cut that manual cost down, then your costs are lower, and so then you can offer your services cheaper. So kind of
Yeah.
all flows together.
Yeah, that's great. Well, as a way to wrap up, then, JP, and then going back to kind of the why aspect of this. I mean, have we reached the point of digitize or bust in the LSP industry? I mean, and who will be the winners moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a huge industry. We're talking, round numbers, 9% of the GDP of North America, that there will always be players. There will always be small players. There will always be a mom and pop 3PL shop out there that are just operating manually. But, the real winners are going to be those that can keep their costs down and offer more services. Shippers out there learned that everything they're doing in their entire process has to be digitized. That's just a generic term that we're going to say, but they don't want a missing step in their entire process, in their entire supply chain process, or even from a shipper's perspective, from their entire sales enablement through order to cash. They don't want anything non-digitized anymore. So and then transportation, and now the spotlight is on us because of what happened during COVID. So those that are going to go bust are those that can't support their customers' requirements now. They have to figure out, how do I handle what my customers want? Because these customers are going to go to where can I have a totally automated, digitized process? And that's the winners there. Those are going to be the winners.
That's a great point. We've done a lot of research here, and continues to bear out that just about companies across every industry look to see customer experience as the main differentiator. And I think you're right. The ultimate winners are going to be decided by the customers, right? If the
Yeah,
customers don't want to do business with you because you're not able to meet their requirements, whether from a service standpoint or from a technology
or
automation
cost, because
standpoint
this once it's
or
enabled,
cost.
it's cost. It's cheaper once it's
Yes.
enabled. You know, so
Yeah.
yeah.
So customers ultimately are going to decide who are the
Hmm.
winners and who are the losers.
Yeah,
And
it's the way it should work, right?
technology, yep, and technology is going to play a role in that. Well, JP, always a fascinating conversation. Like always, we scratch the surface. I think we provide a lot of food for thought.
Yeah,
We made
you
some
know,
predictions here that we'll see how they
well, see
bear
how they
out.
go. We're wrapping up COVID is kind of what I'm thinking. We're on the tail end. Maybe I can get a haircut soon. Um, I mean, getting my COVID shot actually this afternoon. So, I'm
Excellent.
kind of curious to see what happens. But the effects of COVID are going to stick with us. It exposed a glaring hole in
Yep.
transportation, and how we are still so manual in so many different ways, and that has to go away. And the major shippers are going to drive it, and then the mid market's going to drive it, and then everyone's going to have to follow. So
Yep. Well, and so with that, JP, again, thanks for making the
great,
time to be with us today, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics.
great, thank you.
I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the 3G TMS website or the Talking Logistics website, feel free to post a comment there, and I'm sure JP will be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.